all across America and around the world. This is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
Welcome to Veterans Radio. I am Jim Fausone. I'm the officer of the deck today. We've got some great programs for you. I think you'll find very interesting. We always want to remind you, you can find more about Veterans Radio at its Facebook site or by going to veteransradio.net, where we're on the web 24/7. You can find a lot of our podcasts there as well. We post new ones every Tuesday, so you can get a new story, a new interview, something you didn't know before by going to veteransradio.net. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors. First up, we want to thank National Veteran Business Development Council, nvbdc.org. It was established to certify both service-disabled and veteran-owned businesses. You'll find out how they can help your business by going to nvbdc.org. We want to thank Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans fights for veterans' disability rights all across the nation. You can reach them at 800-693-4800 or on the web at legalhelpforveterans.com. If you're in the Michigan area, we want to tell you about an upcoming free hockey event that's happening at USA Hockey Arena in Plymouth, Michigan over the weekend of March 18th, 19th, and 20th. 3 different games, USA Hockey versus Cedar Rapids Rough Riders. It's their military appreciation weekend where you can come out and see some great hockey. The Veterans Community Action Team 9, VCAT 9, is helping to sponsor this, and it'll be a great event for you to get the family out, see some great hockey. You can go to Eventbrite to find this USA Hockey Arena event and register on the tickets. You can, another way you can get there is by going to Veterans Radio's website. You'll see a flyer right at the top for this military appreciation event for this weekend of March 18th, 19th, and 20th. Click on that. It'll take you to the Eventbrite link that allows you to register for tickets, and it'll be a great time. Actually, Veterans Radio will be broadcasting live that Sunday from there on March 20th, and so we look forward to seeing you. But go ahead and hit the website, get those tickets, and come out and enjoy some spectacular hockey at USA Hockey Arena in Plymouth, Michigan, which is located just off M14 at Beck Road. The beginning of March celebrates National Invest in Veterans Week. It's actually March 1st to the 7th, so it's kind of that week's come and gone, but it's focused on drawing attention to veteran business owners and those owners and businesses' contributions to the economy and how it empowers employment and people to have really fulfilling careers. So we want the public to invest in those veteran populations by supporting veteran businesses. So that's what this week's and the month's really designed to do. And we wanted to celebrate that a little bit here on Veterans Radio. You may not know it, but according to the Small Business Administration, small businesses owned by veterans employ more than 5 million people here in the U.S. They have an aggregate payroll of $195 billion and receipts of over $1.1 trillion. It's a big segment of the economy, veteran-owned businesses, and it represents 9.1% of all U.S. businesses. So veterans going into business has a major impact on the economy. And we're going to hear from a couple of business owners. We always have them on here on Veterans Radio, but today we're going to hear from 2 or 3, depending on how many we can fit in the time allotted. Guys who we asked the question, why did you think you can do this? What do you know about food products or other social causes that led you into business? So you're going to find some fascinating answers to those questions. So stick around. We want to welcome to Veterans Radio Matthew Griffin, a Army Ranger who's got an interesting business story over the last 10 years or so. Matthew, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Well, thanks for having me today, Jim. It's good to be here.
Well, you're the Combat Flip-Flop CEO. You sign your stuff Griff, so I hope you don't mind if I call you Griff sometimes.
Yeah, if you call me Matt, I think you're the IRS or
right. And if I call you Matthew, you think your mother's after you. So I know how this works. So you're an Iowa native. How did a nice kid from Iowa end up at West Point and end up an Army Ranger?
I'm a fourth generation warfighter. My great grandfather fought in World War I. Both my grandfathers fought in World War II. My father was actually an academy graduate, so he graduated in 1973, so right after the Vietnam War. He spent 20 years as an Army officer, and then he retired and became a chiropractor. That's how I ended up in Iowa for Palmer School of Chiropractic. And it was just one of those things where either I had to get a scholarship, I had to join the Army, or I had to get a job. And so I just did all three at once, and I just applied to the service academies. I really wanted to go to the Coast Guard Academy. I applied to West Point. I did not apply to Navy, just because, beat Navy. But my father and my family probably would have disowned me at that point. But I ended up applying to West Point, and I got accepted to be in the class of 2001. So in June of 1997, I went to West Point, went to the academy, and it was just a great experience. Going through the whole selection process and the down select process and all the interviews, they really do a great job of trying to bring good human beings into the leadership academy for the military.
And talk about making your way to the Army Rangers.
Yeah, when you're at the academy, you get exposed to a lot of people who served in the military. And I had a really great mentor who was my TAC NCO when I was a junior and a senior, so Cal and a firstie, who was a mortarman in the Ranger Regiment. And we just got along really well, and I just got to sit down and chat with him. And in every experience I had with guys that served in the Ranger Regiment, I just felt that I vibed with. If that's the best way to say it, is like I really felt that these people were my speed and kind of mindset. So I ended up going artillery of all courses of action, just because I liked the stories of forward observers and the guys working with the infantry, really helping out as the king of battle, not the queen of battle, with the infantry. And so I always I liked it, and I thought it was cool. So jumping out of airplanes, getting to shoot rifles, and then be able to control large munitions seemed like something that I wanted to do. So I was already airborne qualified, officer basic course, and then you go to your pre-ranger training, which they had at officer basic. And so we had 72 guys that started. I think that by the time it all ended up, 12 of us went to ranger school, 6 of us graduated. And then out of those 6 that graduated, 4 of us ended up in the Ranger Regiment, which is a pretty cool experience to have those guys that you spent so much time with be able to lockstep all the way with your career, all the way into combat.
Well, so folks might have looked at you though, Griff, and said, "Oh man, the old man was a lifer. He's at the academy now. Griff's in this thing for the long haul. He's going to be a lifer. He's a career man." Didn't turn out that way. You knew you'd end up deployed overseas, and you were. So talk to us a little bit about the deployment to Afghanistan and maybe what was going on mentally for the transition back out of the military to the civilian world.
Well, oddly enough, we didn't know we were going to deploy. You have to remember, we graduated in June of 2001. It was a relatively peaceful time, and so September 11th happened while I was at officer basic course in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And just like everybody else, I felt a feeling of anger and frustration and wanted to get retribution. My girlfriend at the time worked about 4 blocks north of the World Trade Center, so I was scared for her. My mom was a dental hygienist working at a dental clinic for the Navy right outside of the Pentagon, so I was scared for her. And it just was what it was. I was in the Army. I was committed for 5 years. And if I was going to go with the hardest hitting guys that are out there for the Army, which is the Ranger Regiment. So 2003, I went for my first deployment, which was Operation Winter Strike. And that was a paradigm shifting deployment for me, I would have to say. Because, I consider myself a fairly astute, person when it comes to fighting a war, in which I read the religious books. I read the essential Quran. I read the histories of Afghanistan. I read about all the wars. And I watched all the news and I read all the reports. And when I got there, what I found was that it was very much different in real life than from the pages of a book or from a TV screen. We deployed to eastern Afghanistan up along the Pakistani border, where a lot of the insurgent fighters were crossing the borders. And then we went to these remote villages in the middle of nowhere. And what we saw was this communities of people who were generally good people who were oppressed by a narco-financed insurgency. They were having to farm opium for the Taliban or for whatever insurgent group was to raise money to, fund their networks and their organizations. And these are people who would rather just farm food and put their kids in school than to be fighting in the middle of this war. So it was a very difficult deployment in which we lived for months in villages. In the middle of winter, feet of snow, we were killing sheep for dinner. We were buying all of the food they had in their winter stores, and we were going village to village, valley to valley, tracking down fighters in the middle of winter, which was it was a tremendous experience. It was exceptionally hard, but I'm thankful for it because it gave me a perspective that most U.S. service members never would have had the opportunity to even see.
And as you say, it was really sort of transformative in your view of military affairs and world affairs, if you will. You get to about 2008, 2009. What are you thinking about what you're going to do next?
So I did 3 deployments to Afghanistan, and I saw kind of the futility in the fight that we were having there. And then the Ranger Regiment, we went to Iraq. So I went to Iraq in 2005, and I saw the same thing that I saw in Afghanistan, but amplified in Iraq, in which, we weren't dealing with fighters from just Pakistan. We were dealing with fighters from Syria, from Iran, from all these different areas who were traveling all over the world to fight us, where they could fight us, where they could just hop in a car and come do it.
Right.
And the reality of, as long as women are giving birth to young boys over there, and we're over there in a uniform capacity, this conflict is going to be ongoing. It's going to be endless. And as much weight as I swung during that time, because the Ranger Regiment, we did have just about every asset under the sun to win this war. And we were, our term in the special operations is mowing the grass. Right, we're just going to cut the insurgents down that are there, and then 6-7 months later, they're just going to grow right back.
Sure. Yep.
And I saw this as a 27-year-old lieutenant or a captain at that point in the Rangers, and there was the general sentiment around that, and we all started seeing this. This is our 4th, 5th year in the war, and that mindset was ongoing. And so I decided that it was time for me to get out. I transitioned to civilian life, which is tough. It just is. And you hear that sentiment by a lot of veterans, and it's the truth. It's just hard on everybody. And I just went to work in the civilian market, just trying to get back to life. I lost my job in the housing crash as a home builder in 2008. I ended up getting hired to work for a company called Remote Medical International, in which we were contracting doctors and clinics and pharmacies to contractors working overseas. So I started traveling back overseas, and I saw that small businesses were making the most positive impact in these war-torn communities. And I saw this in Africa. I saw it through Southeast Asia. I saw it everywhere that I went. And my mindset was, well, how do we bring more small business to these communities to bolster that initiative? It seems more sustainable and ethical than continuing to send surges of young men and women over there to cut more grass. And one day I just walked into a combat boot factory at the invite of a friend who had built the factory, and I saw what I wanted to do with the rest of my life was to help people make products, so something that they could sell to earn a living, so that way their kids could go to school and eventually it would do well. And the long story is, in this combat boot factory, I saw a flip-flop thong punched through a combat boot sole. It was kind of a prototype joke product that was built. And I just thought it was, a combat flip-flop. So the juxtaposition of the two words was really interesting. I used to think that being an Army Ranger and yanking terrorists, out of their homes in the middle of the night was the best way to serve my country. But now I believe that creating jobs and economy and education in these areas is the best way to serve my country.
And this was sort of accidental while you were realizing the value of small businesses and the security that brought to some of these war-torn villages and locations. Almost accidentally, the business idea of combat flip-flops.
The only way that I could describe it, and it really depends on what your beliefs are, was by divine force. Like the universe kept showing me the same thing in every place that I went, was that small business owners and people that were making things were generally cooler people than people that were shooting each other. So what do we do to create more of that? And yeah, it just happened. And I ended up calling a Ranger buddy of mine, Donald Lee. And I said, hey man, would you be willing to get on this weird project to make flip-flops in a combat boot factory in Afghanistan? And he said yes. And then my brother came along as our designer. His name's Andy. And then we just started this crazy idea of starting a flip-flop company in a combat boot factory in Afghanistan. And it's since blown up to a multi-million-dollar business working all over the world. And then we use our profits we had used our profits to put little girls to school in Afghanistan. And as of June of 2021, when I did the Q2 numbers, we'd gotten our first comma. We put over 1,000 girls in school for a year in Afghanistan.
I want to come back to that piece because the charity is such a big part of this. In Afghanistan, the impact it was going to have was going to be such a big thing. But what in the world made you and another Ranger buddy think you somehow can cobble together a business and make a buck and make this work? I mean, what pixie dust did you have that some other guy didn't, or were you just too stubborn to know you couldn't do it?
I think we were the only guys dumb enough to try it, to be honest.
I didn't want to use that word. I said stubborn.
Yeah, it's when you come up with a crazy idea, people say, oh, there's no way that'll work. And then there's no way that'll work. There's no way that'll work. It's a good idea, but there's no way it'll work. Well, we used to jump out of airplanes and put 500 guys on an airfield in the middle of the night in under 5 minutes and do some very complicated stuff. Just because you can't do it doesn't mean that we can't do it. And that's just our mindset, is like, if real products solve real problems. And if you want to charge a premium for your product, you solve a complicated problem and then charge a premium for it. And so this was a real problem that needed to get solved. And so we came out with a high-end line of footwear that we charge a premium for, but it's a quality product. And we started making something that not only looks good and lasts a long time, but it's got a really cool story and message behind it, which our customers are proud to promout.
Yeah,
which actually made us believe in it was that we started making this stuff and then people started buying it. And it was mainly service members and people that worked downrange who believed in what we were doing, saw the path that we were on and wanted to support us. And they've been with us ever since 2012.
And yeah, that's one of the points I want to get across. It's now 10 years old. It's a real business. It's been there. It's weathered a couple of recessions, financial issues, logistic issues, COVID, all of that, all hard on businesses, and it's there surviving. It's got a great website, combatflipflops.com. And you're into a lot more than just flip-flops. After people stop laughing about the name, you've got some great other products. Talk to us about how that's expanded and moved over time.
Yeah, so we wrote a book about it, and if anybody wants to hear our story that's loaded full of expletives and high adventure, you can find it on our website. It's called Steps Ascending, Rise of the Unarmed Forces. But long story is it's not financially feasible or globally competitive to make footwear in Afghanistan. So we had to shift our footwear to Bogota, Colombia. So, war on terror, war on drugs, mountain people suffering from a narco-finance insurgency. It's the same thing. So we shifted our footwear production to Bogota. We started making textiles in Afghanistan. We started making jewelry out of landmines from Laos, left over from the Vietnam War. And we make T-shirts and hats and a bunch of other things here in America. And we're always hunting for cool products made in dicey areas that can have a positive impact in the world.
Part of this story, though, and maybe the part that actually grabs folks and says, yeah, it's great to realize that small business helps communities become stable, but you also recognize that in Afghanistan, the lack of education, primarily for girls, but really for everybody, but the girls here, needed to be changed, and you started to put some resources into us. Talk to us why that's important and where your mindset was 10 years ago or for the last 10 years as you've been on this mission.
Well, it comes back to wanting to win the war, right? And people look at us and they go, oh, you just want to peace-loving hippies, it'll never work. It's like, no, we're fighters. We are to our core, we are warriors. And sometimes that means you need to take a little bit of a step back and look at why you're in this fight in the first place. And the reason we're in this fight in the first place is because women are not educated. Terrorists come from the same place that we all come from. They come from moms. So unfortunately, in these cultures in which we're doing a lot of our fighting, women are oppressed. They don't have employable skills, no jobs, no education. They're typically married off to men that are 10 to 20 years their seniors. So when the men die, here you have a woman in her 20s or 30s with a couple kids and no way to support them. So if you've ever been to a developing nation, you'll understand there's a lot of kids that are out on the street that are begging for food and for work because they need to support their mom and their family. And if you're a kid and you love your mom and you love your family, you're going to do whatever it takes. And it's in these environments very much, we get equated to gangs here in America. When kids are out on the street because, working because mom can't support their family, that's where gangs pick them up and they'll take the easy, fast money to support their family because that's the only thing that's offered to them. So our mindset is if we educate women, the educated women will educate their kids, and educated kids are more resistant to radicalism. A kid would rather go to school than to strap a bomb to themselves in a market. And so our theory and our effort for the past 10 years has been to educate girls in Afghanistan to prove that over time you can choke out the radical recruitment base simply by educating women.
And you have to somehow break that cycle. And it's so important. This charitable effort by Combat Flip-Flops was so important to break that cycle. But as a warfighter, as a businessman, as somebody who's being philanthropic in Afghanistan, the U.S. pullout earlier this year really had to pull your heart apart. Talk to us a little bit about your reaction and what ultimately you've had to do relative to the philanthropic efforts educating women and children in Afghanistan.
I'll have to say that is the first time my daughters have ever seen me cry. It was heartbreaking. These people are our friends. They're our family. We've been working with them for 10 years. And to hear that they're having to collect their families and run for their lives so quickly, like it just fell apart, absent of what anybody heard, and to have, people struggling to get to an airport and losing people that you're chatting with in that bomb explosion. Everybody felt helpless. I'd have to say that was the only time in my life that I've truly felt helpless. And it's just been soul crushing, to have everything fall apart and to have people who were on the rise now be pushed further back into a hole than they've ever seen in their entire adult lives. And that was at the result of a lot of laziness and poor decision making on behalf of our national and military leadership.
And I think all of us were hoping that, for 20 years, at least girls have been getting educated and they're now teenagers or maybe even a little older. That ought to have an impact on the country. I don't think we've seen it yet, but we can be still hopeful. Are you still hopeful, Griff?
No,
I take it.
I'm trying to be really pragmatic about this, and I'm probably have to say like the most hopeful person, and I'll have to say that I've put my entire adult life into this effort and initiative, and I've sacrificed, as well as my entire team has sacrificed, a tremendous amount behind this initiative. There is some hope in the fact that there are some very large commercial initiatives put forward that might stabilize the country. You know, China does not want Afghanistan to descend into chaos. Iran does not want that country to descend into chaos. Pakistan does not want that country to descend into chaos. They're all somewhat invested in the stability of the area, because if they don't stabilize that area, then it's going to be bad for everybody. I'm going to have to say, give it 10, 15 years. We'll find out.
How does combat flip-flop, which had this education of girls in Afghanistan at its core, how do you move? How do you pivot? What's next that is at the core for combat flip-flops? For those familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we were on the second or third rung for the past 10 years, but now we're down at food, water, shelter. And that's what's important to us, is we have friends and family who are there. And so we are now pivoting to keep people warm, keep people fed, keep people in homes, and supply them with medical supplies. So we've pivoted our philanthropic effort to that initiative. We've pivoted our factory that was making scarves and textiles to send to the United States to making blankets and making jackets. And so we're still employing people. We're still sending money forward to do that. And people can participate in that effort if they want to. If they feel that they would like to put a jacket on a human being who is suffering, they cost $15. If you want to give them a blanket for a small child who is freezing, it costs $10. If you want to, give a little bit more and then have some cash in the kitty for medical supplies, then, we'll take those donations as well. Like right now, it's just become a full-on press effort to keep people warm, clothed, sheltered, fed, and with proper medical care. So we've done that. And if people want to check it out, they can go to combatflipflops.com/AfghanWoobie. So Afghan, AFGHAN So combatflipflops.com/AfghanWoobie. Or if you go to our blog, it's the first. Well, I wanted to thank you, Matthew Griffin, for taking some time today to talk about combat flip-flops. Griff, thanks for taking some time today.
Thank you, Jim.
Certainly hope you enjoyed that, and we're going to talk to a Navy veteran next who got into the food business, and you're going to say the same sort of thing like, where did he think he could pull off that crazy idea? So stick around after some words from our sponsors.
Military veterans touch everyone's life. I'm guessing right now you're thinking of a veteran, a close friend, relative. Maybe it's you. Even the toughest of us sometimes need help, but don't know where to turn for support. You don't need special training to help a veteran in your life. Even small actions can make a world of difference. If you know a veteran in crisis, please call the Veterans Crisis Line, 800-273-8255. 800-273-8255. A message from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs.
If you have a VA claim denied by the Board of Veterans Appeals, contact Legal Help for Veterans at 1-800-693-4800. They're experts in handling cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. Their number again, 1-800-693-4800.
Next up is my interview with Abe Karmarck, who is a Navy veteran who decided to remake America's iconic condiments using foods that are rooted in tradition, heritage, and most importantly, not with added sugar. So I think you're going to find this an interesting discussion on another veteran business owner during this month that we're paying some tribute to business owners. So here's my interview with Abe. We want to welcome to Veterans Radio today, Abe Karmarck. Abe, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Hi, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Well, this is a Navy veteran who's in a really interesting business venture that we want to talk about, True Made Foods. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about how a nice kid like you ended up in the Navy.
Yeah, good question, right? Actually, my parents never would have guessed that I would. Well, no, I I knew at a young age I wanted to go into the military, and I've always talked about it.
They figured it was they thought it was just a phase, didn't they?
Right. Yeah, my baby boomer hippie parents were not into the whole idea. So, but they turned their they changed their tune when they found out the Navy would pay for college. So they were very excited by that proposal. So that really turned them around, and they've been really proud and excited since then of it. And impressed too. So I mean, I think they weren't like anti-military or anything like that.
Well, you grew up in Washington D.C. and you went to Vanderbilt University, which is not cheap. So talk to us through getting through Vanderbilt and then the 8 years in the Navy as a Seahawk helicopter pilot.
Yeah, well, I mean, I split my time growing up. I was born in D.C. and when I was 10, we moved to Brooklyn, New York, and then we lived in Brooklyn in the 80s and early 90s until I was 16 in 1993, and then we moved back to Bethesda, Maryland, which was really nice, quite a change for me. And I finished public school in Maryland, and then got my. And I applied to the Naval Academy and I applied for my ROTC scholarship. And I was lucky enough to accept it to the Naval Academy. And I also ended up getting my ROTC scholarship and decided to turn down my placement at the Naval Academy to go to Vanderbilt on ROTC scholarship, which for me was the right decision. I always think back. I think that was a good decision for me because I just think I needed some time to grow up and mature and get some wildness out of me. And I think I wouldn't have been a good placement at the academy. I probably would have gotten in trouble way too much. To
be honest about it, you don't tell your kids that today, right. But to be honest about it.
We're pushing our kids towards the academies. Of course, we live in Northern Virginia right now, so trying to get them into the academies from this area is so hard. But that's a whole nother story. But yeah, we are. But then, my wife is a Naval Academy graduate, so we met in service. So, obviously, so we've been a big fan of Navy ever since, and they've become our go-to college football team to cheer for since we live in Northern Virginia. It's close.
Yeah, well, you enjoyed it this year, that's for darn sure.
Right? Yeah. I mean, the season wasn't great, but then they ended on the right note.
All you have to do is beat Army.
Right. It's it's an interesting team to cheer for in that way. But it's a little bit more fun than Vanderbilt because I'm rooting for Vanderbilt. Though I still root and cheer for Vanderbilt as a football team. It's painful sometimes.
What was your undergraduate degree in?
I did a international relations East Asian studies focus. Because I was taking Japanese at the time, and I wasn't going to get credit for it because I had tested out at needing a language requirement unless I was part of my major, and so I didn't want to be taking all these hours of the language that doesn't.
Now remember, Veterans Radio listeners, we're talking to Abe because he's now the owner and founder of this food company. So we just heard his undergraduate's in international relations, and he's gone through Vanderbilt on a ROTC scholarship, so he's got to do his payback to the U.S. Navy, and you become a helicopter pilot. None of this yet sounds like you should have anything to do with the food industry.
Yeah, that's a crazy thing about the food industry, right? But yeah, it's it's just what happens. I think actually my Navy time, and I think specifically being a Seahawk helicopter pilot, I was a LAMPS pilot, a Bravo pilot with Bravo version, which means we flew off of they're now called the Romeos. That's how old I am. We've been your airframe has been replaced, but the airframe I flew, the Bravo, was the 60 Bravo, flew on the back of small boys on cruisers and destroyers and things like that, frigates. And we deployed in small detachments, and you had to you're a multi-mission aircraft, so you had to be ready for your missions to change all the time. You had to be training all the time to do different types of things, and that's a lot about entrepreneurship, because you have to kind of be a jack of, when you're the founder, you have to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. You have to be able to understand everything. I got to be able to understand finance and sales. I got to be able to do it but I don't have to be the absolute expert at it. I just have to be, 80% proficient, 75% proficient at it. And then when things get really important, then I can hire out for somebody who's the full expert.
That's when you call in the chief on the helicopter, right?
Exactly. That's it. Yeah, it's when you call in the maintenance chief and be like, hey, I have no idea what's going on with this. You got to fix this. So, but yeah, and I probably broke it. But so that's kind of the point, like being a pilot in the Navy, especially a helicopter pilot, and especially my airframe, I think was a really good preparation for entrepreneurship that way, is like being entirely flexible. And I think as an officer too, you're not expected to be an expert in any one thing necessarily. You have to be, you have to kind of be, always have the big picture is what you're supposed to be doing. Like, at least that's how we were trained. To always know the big picture and be focused on the big picture and know how everything works together, and being able to rely on your people who know more about you on certain things, certain areas where specific knowledge is really important. Specific and deep knowledge is really important. So,
but wait a minute, because I'm going to bring this closer to why this Navy officer thought he could actually pull this off. After getting out of the service, you went and got your MBA at the London Business School, and after that, your career took you into the food business or food industry. Not specifically into making condiments, if you will, but gave you sort of this global picture of how the food industry works kind of on a worldwide basis. Give us a little bit of that, and then we'll get into 2015 when you actually decided, hey, I'm going to give this a try.
Yeah. I actually had a crazy time. I think, people today have it a little bit easier when you're getting out. There's a lot more programs for you, things like this. Well, to say the worst is I actually got my MBA while I was still in, which was a huge benefit. I'm big lucky. I was stationed in England at RAF Molesworth, and I was able to they let me do an executive MBA. So I did my executive MBA at London Business School. So just commuting down to London on weekends and at nights, and then sometimes taking a week of leave and doing a class in a week. Yeah, and I was not prepared I wasn't prepared for I did not do a good job of preparing myself for looking for employment, post. I just kind of had this idea and thought that I got this great, fantastic MBA right now. And somehow the top MBA schools, do a little bit of a bad job of this, where they do really build you up thinking you've got this MBA. Everybody's going to want to hire you right now. And that's not, even in the best of times, that's not always really true. You really do need to hustle and figure out what industry you want to get into, and especially if you're switching industries. And this is the challenge with the veterans too. It's we don't know how to communicate our skills. We don't know how to communicate what we do well. And
period, because there's 7 years between when you get out and before you start Crew-Made Foods, and that really lays the background or the foundation, if you will, for being able to go into this new venture.
Right. So, yeah, what happened to me, I got out in 2008. Nobody was hiring. I would get interviews, but they were just going through the motions. And again, I wasn't very great at the interviews at the time too. I wasn't prepared. I didn't trade. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was not prepared. And, having 8.5 years in the Navy didn't help me at all either, when everybody was looking for a job because everything was falling apart. And these industries like banking and consulting were falling apart, and they were firing people, and they weren't hiring, but they were going through the motions to pretend like everything was fine. So my wife and I had just had our first kid. My wife had been out she got out a few years before me. She got her grad degree in public policy and economics from LSE. We had student debt. We had our first kid, and we were pregnant with our second. And we were living in London with only savings in dollars, and the pound was 2 to 1. So it was not a great situation. My granddad was getting near to the end of his life. He was in his mid-90s at this point, and he was starting to gift out some of his money. So he gave us $9,000, and that helped us survive. So that was a huge help. And then we did some consulting work and things like this. We would find odd, consulting jobs that we would be able to do. But this is that situation of like really no job prospect, no aspect whatsoever. And, just everything looming over us was really scary. And that's kind of what drove me into this whole, really pushed me more into the entrepreneurship thing and being able to do anything in any place, anywhere. And have a whole
it's a lot different. It's a lot different running a real business as compared to the consulting into somebody else's business. So I can imagine how much additional sort of not only stress but things that you learn on something, because you just use the word innovative and scrappy and small. And whenever you start a new venture, and we're talking to the founder of True Made Foods, which is a unique condiment company that Navy veteran Abe Karmarck founded. You have to be scrappy because you are small, and you have to be innovative. And really, what you tackled was this problem in condiments, which is they're just loaded with sugar. And right. You said, hey, we can do something different in this space. Who are you to think you could actually pull this off?
Right. I mean, it's and really, if you look at the rational side of it, like nobody should ever try to do something like this ever. Like entrepreneurship and starting a new product is extremely hard. So like for us, I looked at ketchup. I always knew that ketchup was terrible for you. It is. If you've never looked at the nutritional value of ketchup, like it's awful. It's loaded with sugar. It's 2/3 sugar. There's a 1/4 pound of refined sugar or corn syrup in every single bottle of ketchup, and a 20-ounce bottle of ketchup, and a standard ketchup, Heinz or private label, or even the organic ketchups. The organic ketchups have just as much sugar as regular ketchup. It's just organic sugar. So it's really, and that was something that really upset me because I just knew it's not better for you, right? From a health standpoint, from a metabolic standpoint, it's not better for you. It may be better for the environment because it's organic, but it's not better for you because of the sugar is still terrible, still destroying your hormone balance. And so it was something that I didn't want my kids to eat because ketchup is basically red corn syrup. It's got more sugar per ounce than ice cream. About 20-ounce bottle with a 1/4 pound of sugar in it. That's the same amount of sugar that's in a dozen Krispy Kreme donuts. So if your family's going through a bottle of ketchup a month, they're eating a dozen Krispy Kreme donuts a month. Like that's extra in their diet that you don't know that they're getting. And that's the big problem with the standard American diet in general is like the amount of sugar that's just hidden everywhere. So people might think, oh, well, I only use a little bit of ketchup here and there. But the problem is you're using a little bit of everything here and there, and everything has sugar in it. So we need to try to cut out as much as we can and replace it with real foods. And so I was battling with my kids over ketchup because I got 4 kids, and they're great eaters and stuff like that. But of course, there's always problems with one thing or another. And, ketchup was one of those things. I couldn't get them to stop eating ketchup.
Well, that's how you solved eating something you didn't like, is you put a bunch of ketchup on it. And
ketchup on it, right?
You can eat broccoli now.
Yeah, because you're pouring sugar on it, basically. And then, and every parent has had this problem where, like, the kids won't eat the food, but then you let them pour ketchup on it, they'll eat it. And so you're in this, like, paradox, this conundrum where, it's like you want them to eat the food. You don't really want them to pour this sugary ketchup all over it, but, you need them to eat their dinner. So I thought, there'd probably be a lot of parents out there like me. At the time, we had just moved back to the U.S. and I was working for a charity that wanted me to launch coffee products for them. So I was getting into food, learning more about food by doing this coffee product. I was seeing what was happening in food and how there was a shift. The millennials were coming of age, at the time they're, becoming, in their mid to late 20s, and people were, they were demanding better food and reading more labels. And, so I thought, this is a great time. The market is shifting. The big brands don't have as much brand equity anymore, brand loyalty. And so this is a good time to try to start something and really change something. And I just assumed, I solved a problem that was for myself. Like, I was tired of losing the battles at the dinner table. So I wanted to win the war. So I, created a better ketchup. And, the whole idea came about because somebody I knew gave me the idea of putting veggies in ketchup. And I was like, well, freaking genius. And he had a terrible idea, which was like, you need to add more sugar to cover up the taste of the veggies. I was like, no. I was like, no, that's not how it works. The veggies are sweet. And I knew this growing up because I've always been a big cook. Like my mom taught me, my mom's Sicilian, and she taught me to cook at a young age. I was the oldest kid, so I was always helping with dinner, making dinner. And both my parents worked too. So like we were always helping out. Everybody was doing, so I had to pitch in somewhere. And so I would also help my mom make pasta sauces all the time because we always made pasta sauce, and we always had pasta sauce in the fridge or the freezer, ready to go. And my mom always said that only lazy Italians use sugar. That it's a crutch. It's something you do if you don't have enough time or you're too lazy to cook it the right way. And the right way was to cook it with carrots. And my mom would be like, my Sicilian ancestors had carrots growing in their garden that they used in all their sauces. They didn't have sugar because it was too expensive. You didn't have access to it, right? It was a refined industrial product, which before the World War II was much less available. So it just made so much sense to me, and it kind of applies to a lot of different foods, whether of all ethnicities and nationalities.
Let me ask you a question here, though. Abe, let me ask you a question here, though. Because it's one thing to say, yep, I got to get the sugar out, and B, I know how to do it because I've got this Sicilian mother who showed me a few secrets with vegetables. But how long did it take to experiment from that, if you will, the first kitchen attempt to actually having a product that could go out to retail sales? This isn't an overnight success, I don't think.
No, it's definitely not. I mean, we've been doing this for 7 years and we're still kind of very small and growing fast. So, it takes 10 years to be an overnight success typically. So,
exactly.
Unless you've got you just hit some lightning in the bottle just randomly by magic. But and to be fair, everybody needs to know this, like that we have a big problem in our society where we, deify people who look like they have these overnight successes and things like this. And a lot of times there's a lot more story behiand that, especially the ones who scaled up really fast. Right. Yeah.
That's why I think it's so important to say, this overnight success baloney. I had a lot of recipes that didn't work. And at some point you realize, you can't build a business on ketchup. And you went to its natural sister, which was mustard, and then went to barbecue sauce, which is all sort of interrelated condiments with the same problem. They had too much sugar in it, and you've been able to come up with recipes and approaches that take that sugar out. I want to tell folks that they can find True Made Foods and these condiments in major supermarkets like Whole Foods and Walmart and Kroger and Sprouts, which is again huge success to break into those markets. But it's not just right. We have a nutritional problem in this country, not just sugar, but also sodium. Can you talk a little bit about the products and what the best ones are in terms of sales, what people seem to like, and also maybe about the sodium issue?
Yeah, so we've got the no sugar ketchup, which is our main product now. We launched initially with a low sugar ketchup, which we're phasing out. We're just focusing on the no sugar. We launched the no sugar ketchup in 2018. So it's kind of one of those things from an entrepreneurship standpoint where you start with something that you think is good enough. So we thought lower sugar is better than, full sugar. We should go with that. And then we finally were able to develop a no sugar project that we launched in 2018. It really hit the market in 2019, and that's really in 2020 is really when we saw some growth from it. So that's kind of that testing and figuring out and getting the right product out thing. So now the no sugar ketchup is by far our biggest product by far, and it does really well. We also have 6 barbecue sauces. I wanted to get into barbecue sauce. Barbecue is a natural movement. Typically, most barbecue sauces a lot of them are tomato based. So they have a similar, ingredient and cooking style as ketchup. And so it was a natural movement into barbecue. And, I wanted to really disrupt barbecue because I thought I love barbecue, wanted to do something better with it. And we went into barbecue sauce. And so I partnered with Ed Mitchell and his son, Ryan. Ed's also a veteran. He's a Vietnam veteran, and he's a legendary pitmaster out of Wilson, North Carolina, who is he's the kind of pitmaster who was the real legend before there were barbecue circuits, and the kind of guy who got famous before there were barbecue competitions. And he's famous because his family has been doing it a certain way for hundreds of years. None of this like weird self-taught thing with hacks and shooting it up with injections, the meat up with injections or anything like that. This is like the real deal. This is like how you cooked for 100 years in Wilson, North Carolina. So it was a natural, great fit for us to partner together, and they've been huge partners in that. So we've got these great 6 barbecue sauces. One of them is a low sugar product, our Kansas City style, and the rest of them are all no sugar. All the other SKUs. And we do try to reduce the sodium. We don't claim reduce sodium or low sodium because, number one, we think sugar is the number one enemy out there in the standard American diet. And that's our focus. And number two, we're all about the veggies and adding extra veggies for the natural sweetness and nutrition enhancement. To the product. So, there's only so many claims you can really own. And 3, like we do have to have salt and sodium in the product because you got to make it, taste good at some level. And we are a flavor first product too. We want to be, we want to say that our products can compete with conventional products, but we do try to maintain a lower sodium level. And we're typically about 25% lower than conventional products from a sodium level.
Yeah. Somebody who has to read labels for sodium, it is lower sodium by a lot. So if you're looking to get the sugar out and you're looking also not to just trade it off for way too much sodium, I'd tell you to take a look at True Made Foods. Hey, Abe, tell folks where, if they're not near one of these stores that I mentioned earlier, or maybe they're not stocked up the way they want with all the products, tell folks where they can find out more about this and maybe order up.
Yeah, we've got an awesome website. You go to truemadefoods.com. If you just Google True Made Foods, you'll find us. And we've got, you can buy 3 packs or 6 packs of any product, or you can buy our variety packs. We have a number of different combination packs you can get with different sauces to try everything out and see what you like. It's so truemadefoods.com. We do sell a few items on Amazon. Our biggest sellers are the ketchup, the sriracha, and the Kansas City style barbecue sauce are on Amazon as well. And we'll be adding the other products soon on Amazon in 2022. But for now, it's multi-packs on our website is the best thing if you're not near a Kroger or a Whole Foods or Sprouts. But if you also go to our website and use the Find Us store locator, if you go to the website and click on Find Us, the store locator does a pretty good job of finding which products are sold near and around you based on your zip code or by looking at your IP address. So
it's a great business model, innovative, scrappy, really hits a need in the kitchen for folks to get some sugar out and lower sodium. We're really happy, Abe Karmarck, that you're able to spend a little time with Veterans Radio today and explain how a nice kid from Washington, D.C. and Brooklyn, New York, got through the Navy to the London Business School and ended up thinking, I got to fix this ketchup thing. So a great story. Abe, do you have more products in the pipeline you can talk about?
Yeah, we're launching 3 rubs next year. So they'd be fantastic rubs. They're again family recipes from Ed Mitchell. Each one of these rubs has been refined by generations of pitmasters coming from Wilson, North Carolina. And we've got a pork rub, a rib rub, and an all-purpose rub that are coming out, and they're just amazing. I've been using them, the samples that we've been making. I've been using them all fall. On ribs and pork shoulder and chicken for the all-purpose stuff, and it's just incredible. So it's really exciting. They're all no sugar added, all natural products. So they'll all be Whole30 and Paleo certified. Really excited for those to hit the shelves, and they'll be available on the website as well. So really, really great products that we're really excited about.
Abe, thanks for spending a little time with us today on Veterans Radio.
Thank you. Thanks for the time. I really appreciate it.
So one of the things I think you probably learned from listening to Griff and Abe about their business ventures after the military is that there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of planning. Doesn't always work. then you shift to something else, and there are going to be some hard times. Now, that story sounds like your time in the service, doesn't it? So I think you probably got a lot of skill set from your time in the military that might actually apply over to the business world. So if you're really have been thinking about something you want to do there, we would encourage you to do it as we celebrate National Invest in Veterans Week for veterans business owners. Again, thanks to our sponsors, nvbdc.org, legalhelpforveterans.com, our VSO sponsors, Vietnam Veterans of America Charles S. Kettles chapter, the VFW Graft O'Hara Post, the American Legion Press Corps Post 46. Get out there to our website at veteransradio.net, click on the military appreciation, and go get those hockey tickets if you're in the area. And as always, you can follow us on our website and our Facebook site. If you got story ideas, pass them along. We always love to hear from the listeners, and we get some good ideas from you guys, so we really do appreciate that. And we've got some special stuff coming starting in April that we're going to talk about soon. It's a little too early, but stay tuned. Some new sponsors. Dale will be back next week. Send in any benefits questions you have. And until next time on Veterans Radio, you are dismissed.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.